Welcome to the WholeHog Podcast.
But my main concern is I just want to do the best damn job I can for the University of Arkansas.
I got a question for you though, Scotty. You know that there's other players on our team besides Desi.
Look where we're slated. Look at what we've done the past 2 years and who we've got. Like, it's the greatest opportunity in the nation.
Man, why not Arkansas?
Now, here's your host, Seth Campbell.
Welcome into the WholeHog Podcast, and after what seems like forever, guys, it is officially game week. The Arkansas Razorbacks are going to take on a top 5 ranked Georgia this week, and they've got their hands full without a doubt, but we've got a stacked show for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Arkansas versus Georgia series, just give you a little bit of background information around that. Going to get Matt Jones's and Scotty Bordelon's opinions on just a little bit of the overall perspective of the Arkansas offense and defense and the football team in general. And then we're also going to have buy or sell. So make sure to stick around for that. A little entertaining, easy for me to say, topics there on buy or sell. But first, let's get it started. Matt Jones joining us, Scotty Bordelon joining us. And guys, I've got some interesting facts here about the Georgia series. Arkansas doesn't get to play Georgia a lot. So some of the stats are almost a little bit skewed, and it's kind of interesting. All right, we'll start first with, I'm going to ask y'all questions, and then y'all can respond, and I'll tell you whether or not you're right or not. Has Arkansas ever beaten Georgia in Fayetteville?
No, they never beaten them in the state of Arkansas either.
Correct.
Okay, I'll say no too.
There you go. Oh yeah, we didn't really let Scotty go. Scotty's on the far side.
I know plenty about this. Georgia's 5-0 against Arkansas in the state of Arkansas.
5 and only
4-0 in Fayetteville.
Only one game has been played outside of Fayetteville, which was played in
Little Rock. Yeah,
okay.
2014. That was 45-32. Georgia beat Arkansas.
Okay, so
I always forget about that game. I was there. I remember Georgia scored like 31 second quarter points.
I was a grad student at the UGA at that point, and I was in documentary film, and I was at the Hot Springs Film Festival that morning. I had to go watch 2 documentaries down at the Hot Springs Film Festival, and I think we pulled up to War Memorial about 30 minutes before kickoff and kind of had to hustle inside. That was a game. The final score really wasn't indicative of how the game went. Mm-hmm. Georgia really owned Arkansas that day, and that was the second year of Sam Pittman's offensive line when he was with the Razorbacks.
It was indeed. Okay, so kind of riffing off of that, Arkansas has played Georgia in 8 different locations. Can you name all of them?
Let's see here. They played in Memphis at the bowl game there. They played in New Orleans for a bowl game. They played in the Cotton Bowl. That's Dallas. Fayetteville, Little Rock. They played in the SEC Championship game in Atlanta. They played in Athens. And what am I missing here?
You're missing one.
Probably a bowl game would be or is it a bowl game? Is that what I'm missing?
Yes.
I'm going to guess Birmingham.
No.
I'm not sure what the other bowl game would be.
Shreveport.
Oh yeah, that was the Jack Crow era, right?
It was right before Arkansas joined the SEC.
Yeah, so. I think it was 1991? They played Georgia in the Independence Bowl. Yeah. I think Georgia had a kicker kick a field goal as time expired. Went on to play in the NFL for several years.
Arkansas played Georgia, I think, 3 straight years after playing them when they were not in the same conference.
91, then played them in 92, got beat, and then in 93, Barry Lunny took them down to Athens and got a big upset win over Eric Zier. That was one of Arkansas's Arkansas beat Tennessee and Knoxville in 92, and then that was probably Arkansas's second notable SEC win was whenever they went down to Athens and won in 93. Was it 20-10?
I don't have that with me.
Yeah, I think it was 20-10 was the final score.
So once again, those 8 different locations, obviously you've got Fayetteville and you have Athens, and then you have Little Rock in Dallas for the Cotton Bowl, as Matt said. Then Shreveport, Atlanta, New Orleans, and Memphis. Just a little interesting. 8 different locations, and Arkansas has only played Georgia 14 times. So let's see. Arkansas is 4-10 against Georgia, 2-8 since joining the SEC. All right, guys. Out of the 14 matchups, how many have happened when both teams weren't ranked?
When both teams weren't ranked, or like when one team wasn't ranked?
When both teams weren't ranked.
can't imagine it's very many given how many bowl games they played in.
2.
Of course, the SEC championship game.
Mhm.
I'll go with 0.
It is indeed 2. There have
Okay.
only been 2 matchups that have happened where both teams aren't ranked.
Okay.
All right, so there's your Georgia series quick hits. We will have more stuff like that on WholeHogSports.com, so make sure to tune in over there. Interesting stuff for sure for an Eastern Division opponent that Arkansas. It almost seems like Georgia and Florida, Arkansas just doesn't get to play a whole lot.
Well, when they came into the league, there was a rotation where there were 6 teams in the East. You played 2 teams every year. So Arkansas played South Carolina and Tennessee every year. And then you would rotate. You would play, basically, you were guaranteed to play a team every 7 years, I think is how it was. So when Arkansas came in, they played Georgia at home and then Georgia away. And then the next year, Vanderbilt at home, Vanderbilt away. And it went like that through the East until they got back to Georgia. And I think it was 2000 when Georgia came up here. And it was Houston Nutt's first home loss as the Razorbacks head coach. And then they switched it now to where I think it's even more infrequent that you play teams. It was, I think now you're only guaranteed to play them twice or play some teams twice in like 12 or 13 years.
Yeah.
And so, I don't like how the SEC's got it set up. I've read I think it was Banner Society had a really good article last year that was advocating for pods in college football.
I think I'm in favor of pods.
Yeah, and so basically it's that you don't have divisions. You get rid of the divisions, which I think that would benefit the SEC because what we're seeing right now, the imbalance between the West and the East, and a lot of people forget 13, 14 years ago was a pretty big imbalance between the East and the West. It just never seems like they're quite on the same level. But get rid of the divisions. Play the teams that you have the rivalries with. Make sure you have that game every year. But then rotate all these other teams in these pods, and then you're guaranteed to play a team once every 4 years.
Yeah.
And so that means that if you come to Arkansas in 2020, that by the time you're a senior in 2023, you're going to have played every other SEC team. And I'd love to see that. I don't like this deal where you don't see a team for 6 years like it is for Georgia or – I think it's going to be like 7 or 8 years between when they play South Carolina. I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah, it does seem kind of weird that you can join a conference and then not play a team in that conference during your entire 4 years that you're there as a student athlete. All right, guys, let's get into it. Roundtable segment, we're going to break down the Arkansas Razorbacks versus Georgia, but really we're going to focus on the Razorbacks. With this being the first game of the season, just a 10-game SEC slate, I wanted to see what y'all's thoughts were overall on Arkansas. So we're going to start with you, Scotty, and then I'll pose this same question to Matt. But first, Scotty, what do you want to see? Because it's really easy, to say that, well, they're going to lose this game because Arkansas is pretty heavily an underdog in this game.
Yeah.
But just from your perspective, first game under Sam Pittman with a new offensive coordinator, what do you want to see from the offense in this game?
The coaching staff has been preaching ball security a lot, and you're walking into the game 24-point underdog, like at the minimum, right? Like it's probably gonna move more toward Georgia as kickoff approaches.
26 and a half.
26, yeah. So probably going to be, it might be even higher by the time the game kicks off. But if you're Arkansas and you feel like you're going in with, I don't know that you feel like you've got a good chance, but if the ball bounces your way here or there, like you could probably hang around and you might be able to hang around in this game for a little bit. I think that's what I wrote in my Hogs Illustrated prediction. I think Arkansas might be able to hang around for a half. Just take care of the ball. And I want to see how Felipe Franks kind of handles himself in the face of pressure. Looking at some of his advanced stats, he's not been great throwing the ball with pressure in his face. And so I don't think Arkansas can afford to give Georgia just extra chances to go score. Like Arkansas's got to take care of the ball. They've got, in some way, they've got to try to establish the run, and that's going to be really, really hard because Georgia they allowed 2 rushing touchdowns all last season, and both of them were to quarterbacks. I think that's what I read. and they've got all SEC caliber players littered across their defense. And so it's if you can find holes in Georgia's defense, I'm not sure that there are any, but you've got to be really precise. You've got to, if you're Felipe Franks, you've got to make really quick decisions. I don't know that you want to necessarily be too careful with the ball. You're obviously playing a top 5 team. You got to take your chances if you want to have a shot to hang around in this game. But he's got to utilize his playmakers, get the ball to Rakeem Boyd on swing passes in space and let him try to make guys miss. Get the ball to Traylon Burks, and you got to utilize your weapons. So, also curious to see how Arkansas's offensive line, with potentially a couple of redshirt freshmen starting, how they're going to hold up against Georgia's front, because they're pretty loaded, really talented up front.
Yeah, I don't think Arkansas is going to win this game, and so I think it's all about doing things the right way. Those are the things that I'm going to be watching. So like on the offensive line, are the snaps clean? Are the offensive linemen able to hold their blocks for a little bit? It's what, when you hear Sam Pittman talk about strain, that's what he's talking about, being able to hold that block, through the whistle. Those are things that we just haven't seen the last couple of years. So is that better? I'd like to see some success from Arkansas in downfield passing. We haven't seen a lot of that. Most of their success in the passing game the last couple of years have been on little swing passes.
I could give you the downfield passing stats from the last 2 quarterbacks.
They're not good.
They're not good.
They were not good the last couple of years. And really, we haven't seen Arkansas have a downfield passing attack since maybe 2016 when Austin Allen was playing during the season when he wasn't injured. And then offensively, can they score a couple of touchdowns? Georgia, if you go back and look throughout the Kirby Smart era there, in season opening games, they are outstanding. They've given up 3 touchdowns in 4 season openers under Kirby Smart, and they haven't allowed a touchdown in their last 2. Now, those opponents were Austin Peay and Vanderbilt, but I don't know that Arkansas is really in any position to look down its nose, at anyone right now. And so Arkansas kind of falls into that Vanderbilt category at this point in time. Can they score a couple of touchdowns against Georgia? We'll see. Those are the things, that I'm interested to see from the offense this week. And to touch on and to follow up on something Scotty said, 2018 in the SEC championship game, Josh Jacobs scored a rushing touchdown in the second quarter, and that was the last time Georgia's defense has given up a rushing touchdown to a running back.
Just say that one more time.
Josh Jacobs is now playing in the NFL.
Yeah, he's the guy that went off on Monday night.
Yeah, I think this is – I think it's basically 15 and a half games, so you're talking 62, 63 quarters. That's how many the Georgia defense has gone without giving up a rushing touchdown to a running back.
Insane.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable.
Insane. In Arkansas, I was looking at their big play stats in the game notes that they put out, and I think that last year they had 1 pass play over 50 yards. 1 is incredible. So
I think wasn't that the CJ O'Grady play?
It had to be, yeah.
That's exactly the note that I made, was that there wasn't any to guys that are still on the roster, which is
and the O'Grady play shouldn't have gone for more than about 10 or 15 yards.
But he broke it.
Yeah,
against Colorado State.
Yeah.
All right, guys, flipping it over to the other side, Scotty, what do you want to see from this defense under Barry Odom?
Pressure. Arkansas has got to get pressure on whoever Georgia's quarterback is, and that's not going to be very easy. And you've got to I'm assuming that DeJuan Mathis is probably going to start at quarterback for Georgia, because JT Daniels, as of Wednesday, Kirby Smart said that he was not medically cleared for the game. And so I kind of
think they might not ask the doctor till Friday.
Yeah.
I think there's some mind games going on there, some gamesmanship.
Yeah. I'm expecting DeJuan Mathis. He's dual threat guy, pretty good with his legs. And that's anytime Arkansas plays a quarterback like that, he seems to give Arkansas fits. And so you've got to be able to try to contain him, maybe spy him. And I don't know if that's like a Joe Fouché type, or, maybe a Hayden Henry or somebody. Greg Brooks could be any of those guys, maybe somebody I didn't mention, but they've got to probably spy on him, because he can make plays with their feet, extend drives on, Arkansas gets him like 3rd and 8, and you're feeling pretty good about possibly getting off the field. He can run for 10, 11, 12 yards, bust a big play on you. I want to see Arkansas be sure in their open field tackling too. I think that's going to be a really big deal. They got to try to gang tackle. I mean, you can go on and on and on. Just it's going to be such an uphill battle. You just got to do the little things right. It's just like gang tackle in space, and just not let like a 6-yard dump off pass to a tight end or a speedy receiver turn into like a huge play and potentially a touchdown. So just some of those things. But mainly pressure. You got to get some pressure on the quarterback.
I thought it was interesting what Sam Pittman said on his radio show about if Mathis is the quarterback, you need to put pressure on him because he hasn't started before. But also, you don't want your defensive line to rush past him. That's when lanes open up in front of a young quarterback to where he can run. So I thought that was really interesting and a unique perspective of you need to make him uncomfortable, but not so uncomfortable that you're behind him, because when you're chasing a guy like Mathis, you're not going to win that race. What do you think, Matt?
Well, the things I wrote down that I'd like to see defensively, physicality. I think that the defense just has lacked that for the last couple of years. Never saw that under John Chavis. You did not see them being a physical defense, and so can they be physical, especially up in the defensive front? And can they create a turnover? If you can create a turnover, then not saying that this game would change on it, but that's how games change. You get an interception inside the 35-yard line, and it sets up a short field. If your offense can punch it in. You just haven't seen them create a whole lot of turnovers in the last couple of years. It seems like it happened a little bit early last season. They had a defensive touchdown, I think, in the Ole Miss game. Might have had a defensive touchdown either against Portland State or Colorado State. Can't remember.
Colorado State.
DeJohn Harris had the interception return against A&M. But after September, it was like the turnovers just disappeared. And so, really interested to see if they can create some turnovers in this game.
And then another just topic to look out for in this entire season, but especially starting off on this first game against the Georgia front. We've already mentioned it. Georgia's defense hasn't given up a rushing touchdown since not last year, but the year before that. So Arkansas's offensive line, they're starting 3 underclassmen. What is your concern level on the offensive line? We'll go rating it from 1 to 10, Scotty, with 10 being I'm very concerned, 1 being probably not going to be a 1, but 1 being you're not concerned
you
at
could
all.
probably just go 5 to 10. What's your concern level? Mine would probably be a 7, because you feel really good about, I think, the left side, especially at left tackle, Myron Cunningham. He's been consistent, and it's kind of, I would probably say he's your leader on the offensive line. And then right tackle, they don't for sure have a starter. It's either Noah Gatlin or Dalton Wagner. So we'll have to just, I guess, wait until they announce the starters on the Jumbotron before the game, who's going to be the starter there. But Ricky Stromberg, feel pretty good about Ricky Stromberg, but it's the guys that we've written quite a bit about during the preseason. It's Brady Latham and Bo Limmer. Like, those guys have had outstanding camps, but at the same time, they're redshirt freshmen. And they haven't had just a ton of playing experience. I think Bo Limmer played like 30 snaps last season, and 19 of them came in like a blowout loss. And so I don't know how meaningful those were. And now him and Brady Latham, as good as they may have been in preseason camp, they're about to face like completely different animals with Georgia's defensive line. And I mean, you could even throw in Georgia's linebackers too, because I'm sure those guys are going to be searching to get to the second level to open some holes for Rakeem Boyd. It's a little bit, I would say it's a concern. I'll probably go with a 7.
I think for this game, it's a 10. I think for the season, it's a 4 or a 5. Oh. And I think, this is going to be the best defensive front they see until Alabama. And it may be a better defensive front than they will see in the Alabama game on December 5th, assuming that game gets to be played. But this is a great defensive front. They're really, really good in the middle. And so I think that's going to be a concern for that interior offensive line, where you've got Stromberg starting for the first time at center, and you've got Brady Latham and Bo Limmer, like Scotty said, who didn't play a whole lot last season. and now here they are starting. And so I think they're going to get a lot better from playing Georgia in the first game, though.
For sure.
And so what I think you see from the line, don't be too critical of the line this week against Georgia, because it's going to be one of those deals where you remember when who was it? There was an injury to one of the quarterbacks, and they came in against Alabama, and it was like, oh gosh, it'll break that quarterback. I think it might have been Austin Allen. I think what ended up happening was that by seeing the best right there from the get-go, it made him better, down the line. And so I think you're going to see the same thing from the offensive line this week. By seeing a great defensive front in Georgia, I think it's going to make them a lot better for when they play Mississippi State the following week. And I think it might be one of those deals where, like, if you look at those Pro Football Focus gradings against Georgia, it's going to be a really poor grade potentially, but it might be a really good grade against Mississippi State because the quality is different and because they will have learned a lot of things from seeing players as talented as they'll see this weekend.
I think this game is going to remind me a little bit of the Auburn game in Fayetteville last year. Auburn's defensive front last year was so good with Marlon Davidson and
Derek Brown. Just two monsters. Like, I remember one of the first plays of the game, Rakeem Boyd catches like a swing pass in the flat, and Marlon Davidson just ran him down.
I think I remember you saying you don't see many people catch him.
No, human beings that size don't do that. Like Georgia, like Auburn, probably even more so, they've got freaks like that. They can just go track down an all-SEC caliber tailback in the flat when he's running full speed. Like, I think it's going to remind a lot of people a little bit of the Auburn game last year, just how dominant a defensive front Arkansas is going to see.
I gave Derek Brown one of my Heisman votes last year. I thought he
incredible.
was that good. He was the best player I thought I saw in person last year, and of course, in person being teams that play the Razorbacks. Watch this weekend for Jordan Davis. He's their nose tackle, 6'6", 330 pounds. How can they? I think you're going to learn a lot about Latham and Limmer. And then we know Stromberg's a good player. We've mentioned this before, that we think Stromberg's probably going to be an all-SEC type lineman before he's finished. And I think that's part of why they put him at center. Think about when Pittman was here earlier and they put Frank Ragnow at center. He really likes to have maybe his best lineman there in the center of the line. You got to be able to do some other things in order to play that position, obviously. But how can Stromberg and Limmer or Stromberg and Latham, because I think you're going to see a lot of double teams against Davis, how can they control him? And is he going to make some plays? Probably. Yeah. But if they're able to control him on a somewhat consistent basis, then I think that's a good sign for this offensive line moving forward. And like I said, I think long term, there's some concerns here because you've got, if Gatlin starts at right tackle, he's had that knee injury. Wagner doesn't have a lot of experience there. Really, outside of Stromberg at center, and he didn't play the position last year, and Cunningham at left tackle, there's just not a lot of experience on this offensive line. And so there's concern there. But I think with Pittman and Brad Davis, I think they're going to be an okay line this year. I just don't know that you're going to see it in game one.
Be a good week to see Limmer and Latham's mean streaks come out. They're going to need it.
They're going to need a lot of that. All right, guys. Well, that kind of wraps up our Georgia preview. And we're going to move now into just a few season predictions. This is the only time that we can do this, guys, is before the season starts. We're going to kind of go in to see what we think is going to happen for some of the Razorbacks and the Razorbacks as a team in a whole. So, starting out, I'm going to ask a very vague question. What would be a quote-unquote good year for Arkansas football in your mind, Scotty?
Arkansas hasn't won an SEC game in a long time.
Over 1,000 days.
So you would say that a good year would constitute just like you want to get off of that losing streak in conference play. I think if you can win, I think there are several winnable games on the schedule. If you go out and compete and you're competitive, you're playing some of these teams close down to the wire, and maybe you can sneak a couple, maybe 3 wins out of this. Who would say that that's a bad year? Nobody's really expecting Arkansas to go out and have just a great year. But if you can knock off a couple teams and Sam Pittman can continue to build a belief within the program, that's a quality, very quality year one.
What do you think, Matt?
So I've got written down here that I think you can put the SEC in tiers. Okay, so I think you've got 3 tiers in the SEC. You've got your top tier, which is Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, right? Middle tier, probably A&M, Tennessee. You could probably say Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Missouri. And then you've got this bottom tier where Arkansas has been hanging out in the last few years with Vanderbilt, Kentucky, South Carolina hadn't been very good. And the reason I say that is because you look at their performance against these tiers in the past few years. Auburn, they've lost their last 3 games against Auburn by 32, 31, and 41 points. Alabama, 32, 34, 41 points. LSU, not quite so bad, 23 points, 7 points, 36 points. They just haven't been competitive against that top tier in the last few years. And then you get down A&M, they've had some touchdown losses. Mississippi State, there have been some close games, but the last 2 years have been blowouts. Can they be better this year against those tiers than maybe they've been in the past? And unfortunately for Arkansas, they don't get to play Vanderbilt, Kentucky, or South Carolina, who are hanging out down there on the bottom. But instead of losing to Alabama and Auburn and LSU by 36, 41, and 41, can you play those teams within maybe 15 to 20 points this year? Instead of losing to Mississippi State and Ole Miss by 2 to 4 touchdowns, can you play those games to a field goal or maybe even win those type of games this year? So that, to me, is how I kind of gauge a good season. Can they be more competitive? Because that's just what they have. You just haven't seen that the last few years. And even going back to the end of Brett's year, they were still competitive. They lost to – they almost beat Mississippi State in Fayetteville. People forget that. They nearly beat Missouri in Fayetteville in his last game. They just couldn't close games that year. What you've seen the last 2 years is that they couldn't really play with anybody, with the exception of A&M, it seems like. And so can they be more competitive? That's how I would gauge a good year.
I think that's really interesting. As soon as you said that you could divide the SEC into tiers, I thought of tears falling from your eyes, not actual
We've seen plenty of those.
divisions. All right. Rakeem Boyd was the only Hog on a preseason all-SEC team. He was the second-string running back. How many Razorbacks land on the end-of-season all-SEC teams? Matt?
I say no more than 3. I don't think that they have anybody on defense who is an all-SEC caliber player this year.
Agreed.
I think that, maybe like a Jalen Catalon, I think maybe in time he could grow into an all-SEC type player. Maybe Julius Cates is an all-SEC player by his second year. But I don't think they've got Julius Coates. But I don't think they've got anybody this year that's all SEC caliber on the defense. And so I say no more than 3. I think Boyd could be all SEC. I don't know that he's a first-team back because there's a lot of really good running backs in the league. I think that Stromberg and Cunningham both have the potential to potentially land maybe on that second, third type team this year. I don't think either of them are going to be first-team players, and I think we still may be a year away from Stromberg reaching that all-SEC potential. So no more than 3, no more than those 3 that I mentioned.
Yeah, other than Rakeem maybe landing on a second team, possibly a third team. I mean, it just depends on what kind of year he has. I could see potentially like Traylon Burks making like a return specialist type. He could land in one of those spots. But aside from that, like we talk about how good the defensive linemen are in this league, like the offensive linemen are great too. And I don't know that Arkansas is going to have the team success to warrant like Myron Cunningham, as good of a season as he could have. Like he's probably still not going to land on one of those all SEC teams. And so I don't see anybody really from the defense, and I could be totally wrong. Like maybe Buster Brown goes out and has a great year, or Joe Fouché, or Jerry Jacobs. Like it could be, those would probably be my top 3 candidates, and Julius Coates might be a fourth, but I don't see it happening this year. I'd probably go 2 max with Rakeem and maybe Traylon Burks potentially as a receiver. You know, if Felipe Franks is as advertised, But I think it's more likely that he gets on an SEC team as like a special teams return specialist type guy.
Scotty mentioned something important. It's that a lot of times it's based on your team success. If you're you have to be an absolute standout player if you're on a bad team to get on all SEC teams. And did Boyd get on an SEC team last year?
I can't remember. I think I know Traylon Burks got on the SEC All-Freshman team.
Yeah.
But I can't remember if Rakeem did last year.
Boyd had a lot of big runs last year, especially, against Kentucky. He had that big run for second play of the game. He had a good one against Mississippi State. You got to have a lot of those in order to get onto an all-SEC team if you're playing on a poor team.
Guys, good stuff there. We not high on Xavier Kelly. We have question marks about that.
Well, I don't know if Xavier Kelly's going to be the starter.
I mean, it could be Isaiah Nichols.
Yeah, I mean, and Nichols has apparently made a pretty good push to push him. And, this is the thing that bugs me is that these guys, Xavier Kelly and Levi Draper, they may be good players, but I think a lot of times the expectations for a player is not based on what they did at their old school. It's based on the school they came from.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if Xavier Kelly was good enough to get a scholarship to Clemson, he must be, the greatest thing since sliced bread to come play for Arkansas. Or Levi Draper playing at OU, or Luke Jones coming from Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some people ask, well, why is he only the battling for second team left guard if he's come from Notre Dame? Well, he didn't play at Notre Dame.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times we project these expectations on players based on where they came from and not necessarily what they did. And if you look at what Xavier Kelly did at Clemson, it's not a whole lot. Right. And so it's hard to imagine.
Same with Levi Draper.
Yeah, I mean, and so it's hard to imagine him coming from that and going into a better conference where they have better defensive linemen that he's going to be going up for those types of awards against potentially. I just don't see that happening, especially not when he's still in a position battle to beat out Isaiah Nichols here 3 days before the first game, 2 days, whatever we are.
Looking up Rakeem Boyd's accolades on his page on ArkansasRazorbacks.com, I do not see any mention of an all-SEC team.
I didn't think
it's tough. It's really hard.
I think Dejon Harris might have been their only all-SEC player last year, and I think it was like as a second or third team linebacker.
Yeah. Yep.
And that was probably due to nothing more than the number of tackles he had.
Yeah, it was like his third straight 100 tackle season or something like that. It's just kind of built on what he's also done in the past.
And he had to be on the field so much,
Yeah.
and that's why he had so many tackle opportunities.
All right, guys, going from Rakeem Boyd, or really how many SEC guys are going to land, or Arkansas guys are going to land on the SEC all SEC team, to Felipe Franks, a guy that has had success in the SEC, led Florida to 10 wins, a New Year's Six Bowl, had the injury, has come back, and has said that he feels full go. He feels like he's taking game-like reps in practice and that he's not really going to be all that worried about his leg. Scotty, what do you expect from former Florida Gator, now Arkansas Razorback, Felipe Franks this season?
A much more competent quarterback than what we've seen from like the last 7 guys. And you can talk on and on about his experience. He's won a New Year's Six Bowl. He's been there and kind of done that in the league before. Like, you can watch his highlights. And I know Mike Woods did a reaction video to Felipe's highlights, and I mean, the dude can play. It's just, can he consistently have enough time to read the field and get the ball to his playmakers? Like that, I think that obviously goes a long way in whatever kind of season your quarterback has. Like, does he have the amount of time that he needs to wait on Traylon Burks to get out of his break and come back and catch the ball? Like, I expect him to show great poise and composure, and I think he's a confident dude. Like, any interview that you listen to from him, he sounds like a pro. Like, he's been doing this for a long time. I wonder if he's going to have to shake off a little bit of rust early on, and shaking off rust against a top five team, potentially one of the best defenses in the country. That's pretty tough in your first game back after think I looked it up, like 300. It'll be 378 days on Saturday since the last time he, ran out on the field with an offense and in a meaningful game. So I expect him to have a pretty good year. I think it just comes down to continuity up front with Arkansas's offensive line. Like if those guys can kind of come together and be cohesive, like I think he's got a shot to put together a decent year.
What do you think, Matt?
I'm going to preface this with if Arkansas's offensive line can give him time, if Arkansas's wide receivers can create some space, and if those two positions can stay healthy, because there's not a lot of great depth at those two, those two.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Along the line or at receiver. If all of those things happen, I think he can have a big year. I like Kendall Briles. I think he is going to put them in position to make some plays. And guys, this gets lost a lot of times when you talk about the SEC West is so much better than the SEC East. It is from a win-loss perspective, and when they're playing each other head-to-head, the West wins a lot more. The East plays better defense, and Franks did a really nice job playing against Eastern Division defenses a couple of years ago. And so not saying that the defenses are there's this huge gap between what you see in the East and what you see in the West, but overall, Mark Stoops coaches a really good defense at Kentucky, and Will Muschamp coaches a really good defense at South Carolina, and Kirby Smart at Georgia, and Barry Odom at Missouri up until last season. I think he's going to see maybe a little bit easier defensive look than what he saw a couple of years ago against Florida. Now, a lot of that depends on, the types of athletes that he has around him. Are they wrecked by COVID or injuries, or, that's going to come into play. Is the offensive line going to be able to give him a lot of protection? Maybe not against the likes of Georgia and Auburn and Alabama, but, I think in maybe some of these other games, and going back to what I was talking about tiers earlier, maybe when they're playing like these tier 2 teams and maybe some of these tier 1 teams, maybe he can put up some big numbers, and I expect to see him have some big games this year. I think it's going to be the best year they've had from a quarterback since at least Austin Allen in 2016, and maybe Brandon Allen when he had that big year in 2015.
All right, guys, last question here before we head to the break. Who should Arkansas Razorback fans keep an eye out on this year? Maybe a guy that's off of the radar right now, but could come onto the radar in a big way. So who is your biggest surprise player of the year, Scotty?
I don't know if it's like necessarily really off the radar, this pick, but I might go with Isaiah Nichols. Like I think he's played in like 15 games his last 2 years. He's got like 18 tackles. So he hasn't had like just big productive years like his first 2 years on campus. But he's fighting with Xavier Kelly to start at defensive tackle, and everything that we've heard from coaches about Isaiah in preseason, he's been really consistent. They know he's a guy that they can really count on. They're going to get good effort from him day in and day out. They don't have to worry about him. Like, they know he's going to bring consistent effort. And listening to Barry Odom on the kickoff luncheon a couple weeks ago, they're asking Isaiah to do a lot. And, when they go to like different fronts, like they're asking him to do different things. Like, there's a lot on his plate. And Isaiah was the first person that, I don't know how much you can really look into that, but Isaiah Nichols was the first name out of Barry Odom's mouth when he was talking about his defensive front. So, obviously, like, the headliners on that D-line are going to be Dorian Gerald and Julius Coates probably. But I'm still not sold on Jonathan Marshall. Like, he might be the strongest dude on the team, but needs to produce. Isaiah Nichols, I think, might be your surprise guy. He's definitely going to have a significant role. If he doesn't start, he's got a big role.
And Scotty, you have a story about Isaiah Nichols that's on WholeHog Sports, right?
I do.
So make sure, just a little tease there. Scotty got to talk with Isaiah Nichols, and so that is in the link in the description.
And talked to his high school coach, Zach Clark, he was a quarterback at Arkansas in the early 2000s, like 2000, 2001?
Yeah, he was a starter in 01 over Matt Jones.
Yeah, so he's head coach at Springdale High School. I covered Isaiah when I was on the high school staff, and you'd be hard pressed to find a more dominant player in the state when Isaiah was in school. So he's always been a guy I've kept my eye on, but now it seems like he's like that door is open for him to kind of seize the opportunity to, go out and do what he's always wanted.
So the link is in the description if you want some more background information on Isaiah Nichols. All right, Matt, biggest surprise player of the year for you?
Jalen Catalon. And because I think that the reason I say that is he didn't play last year, and I think he's going to be really good. I think he was a really good, really highly recruited player out of Mansfield, Texas. And if you go back and look through Barry Odom's past, he's had a lot of success working with safeties. And I think that, you're going to see a really good player in Catalan. Is he going to make some mistakes? Probably. He's never played in a college game before. But I think you're going to see some flashes from him this year that are going to show that he's going to be a really good player.
I think Traylon Smith, the backup running back, is another guy who might surprise some people. Rakeem Boyd's probably not going to be able to take the 10-game beating. Like, he's not going to be able to stay on the field all the time. So Traylon Smith, I think, is going to be a guy to also keep an eye on. So I think he's going to be a reliable number 2 back.
All right, guys, good stuff. Well, we're going to head on out to break, but don't go anywhere because coming up right after this break, we've got Mike Griffith from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Dog Nation on the Whole Hog Podcast.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Welcome into the Whole Hog Podcast, Seth Campbell, and we are joined now by Mike Griffith. He is a writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Dog Nation, Heisman voter, and along with a whole lot of other stuff, he's making his debut this week on the Paul Feinbaum Show. So, Mike, thanks so much for joining us here.
Yeah, season debut, back, I guess it's his 3rd year. We like to do those weekly deals. It's a lot of fun, and everybody loves SEC football, man. Listen, I don't confuse it. It ain't about me. I'm the guy that talks about what people are interested in, and people right now are interested in Georgia as a potential. They've been there as a national championship. I think they've gone to annual national championship contender status. I think we could say that under Kirby Smart, but it's a new year. It's certainly a new offense with new quarterbacks against a new Arkansas. So, we're all kind of excited to see what's going to happen at Razorback Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. We're all really just excited that football is going to be played. But you mentioned the quarterbacks, and I think we got to start there. Who do you see starting for Georgia in Fayetteville?
Well, there's been some injuries there with JT Daniels in his knee, and Kirby said he's not cleared yet. So if that's the case, it's Dwan Mathis. Dwan's a redshirt freshman from Oak Park, Michigan, and was once an Ohio State commit. He was kind of the player to be named later when Justin Fields decided that he wanted to transfer to the Ohio State. Dwan Mathis was the guy that was getting ready to sign right before that happened, and he caught wind of it and decided that he wanted to be a Georgia Bulldog. Of course, Dwan's story is kind of interesting. He had emergency brain surgery in May of 2019. So, the fact that Dwan's even playing football is really pretty remarkable. And he's had quite a comeback. So there's definitely a subplot there. But his talents are undeniable now. He's a 6'6", 210-pound guy with a lot of speed. Very nimble on his feet, great escapability, big arm. He'll take you 75 yards downfield if you let him. But he's an inexperienced guy. So hard to say how he's going to look in this offense.
Hey, Mike, I'm a big fan of receiver play. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about George Pickens and maybe some of the rest of Georgia's wideouts Arkansas's DBs will be matched up with.
Yeah, well, George is going to be the obvious one. Everybody's going to be locating number 1 on every snap. He's incredible talent. You guys know he's an emotional player. Plays very physical, great catch range. Anything in his area code, he's going to grab it. He's going to probably get safety help over the top. Too physical to press. But I think Arkansas is going to identify him. So then you go, well, who else? Well, Jermaine Burton's a true freshman. They think a lot of slot guy, a lot of speed, good hands. And then they got a guy named Matt Landers. He's another big guy. He goes about 6'5", 200. Matt's kind of been a hot and cold. But we think this could be the year he puts it all together. I mean, he's got NFL prototype size if he can catch the ball consistently. And then Kyrus Jackson. He's a redshirt sophomore, another slot. Tough kid, makes the tough catch in traffic, and another one of those guys that's going to fight you downfield with blocks. So those would probably be the 4 top receivers. Demetrius Robertson comes back. He had 30 catches last year. Kind of a speed guy. I'm sure Arkansas will know when he goes in motion. They like to give it to him on the jet every now and then. So they've got some weapons there on the perimeter.
Talking to Mike Griffith from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution here on the Whole Hog Podcast. We've talked 2 questions about offense, but I got to go with the third here. Georgia has new offensive coordinator in Todd Monken. What is the offense going to look like underneath him?
Well, I think it depends on the quarterback. Just like anybody else, you got to design an offense around what your quarterback can and can't do. And, with this being Dwan's first game, we don't really know. I mean, he's a redshirt freshman. Didn't really get to play a whole lot last year. He was on the scout team towards the end of last year. And, of course, there was no spring. And then earlier in the summer, it was Jamie Newman and JT Daniels battling it out. Looked like JT was going to win it. After a scrimmage won, Jamie Newman decided to leave. It felt like, hello, Newman, goodbye, Newman, right? And so then that put Dwan on deck. And when JT's knee didn't get cleared, it put Dwan in the starting lineup. So I would imagine with a guy like Dwan, you might see some read option. You might, again, I told you he's got a very strong arm. He's going to stretch the field out vertically. And I think he'll stretch it out horizontally. Very strong arm, maybe some quick passes or deep throws. It's really going to put a lot of pressure on that Arkansas defense to defend a lot of the field.
And then on the flip side with defense, and Kirby Smart's led defenses there at Georgia have been outstanding. It really feels like Georgia now, really since he's been there, they don't have to rebuild but reload. Who should some Arkansas fans look out for on that defensive side of the ball this year?
Just everybody. They really are that good. They're really good. In the secondary, Richard LeCount, he's a 4th-year starter. This guy's special now. He had 6 turnovers in the last 6 games, 2 picks against Baylor. Number 2, he's all over the place. Lewis Seen was a top 50 kid out of Texas. He was a freshman. Now he's a sophomore. Played really big against Baylor in the Sugar Bowl. I think he had 6 tackles. So they're really good at safety. They got 3 NFL cornerbacks for 2 spots. Right? Eric Stokes is really sticky. DJ Daniels, a little more physical guy, come up and get in your chops. Tyson Campbell's kind of long. He's a good matchup for some of those longer, taller receivers. They got a couple guys they call stars when they go to that 4-2-5. It's just kind of like a nickel. Got a game. Mark Webb is a senior, pretty reliable guy, and a guy named Tyreek Stevenson. So they've got some guys that are going to be buzzing around the secondary making plays. And then the front 7, Azeez Ojulari, I don't know how the guy didn't make preseason All-SEC. He had 34 quarterback pressures and 5.5 sacks, and he only played about half the snaps last year because they're so deep at that end position. They throw somebody fresh out there. Nolan Smith was the number 1 overall recruit in the country 2 years ago. He's legit, and he plays behind Azeez. And then Jermaine Johnson was the number 1 JUCO guy in the country 2 years ago overall, all positions, and he also plays that spot. So they've got 3 guys coming off that edge. They're just deadly. And then they got Jordan Davis in the middle. He gets a lot of attention. He's about 6'6", 345, a real space eater, very athletic guy, able to take up 2 offensive linemen on most plays. Trevon Walker, a really special guy last year. He was on the kickoff team at 6'4", 280, and he's got that kind of athleticism. So Devontae Wyatt was second on the team with 20. I could just keep throwing names at you, but I think it's the best defense in the country.
Mike, looking through some of Georgia's game notes, Bulldogs typically always have pretty good tailbacks, but top 2 guys from last year are gone. But just kind of give us a rundown of some of the other guys at that position. Maybe it looks like Zamir White might be the guy there.
Yeah, I'm just not sure. We're talking about a lot of single back and shotgun. And when I think of Zamir, I think about a guy, and I heard Grant Morgan talking about this on the Arkansas press conference earlier, and Grant's right. I mean, Zamir's pretty much a guy that's going to hit the line of scrimmage, B gap to B gap. I do think he's going to try to do some things in space. I mean, you don't want to be predictable if you're Georgia. If Zamir White's in the game, you're going to run it. If James Cook's in the game, you're going to throw it. No, they're both going to run. Zamir will catch some passes and James will run some balls, but I do think Grant's got a good read on that. I think that Zamir is primarily a downhill runner, short, power back, goal line, first down back, maybe third down back, on 3rd and 1. James Cook's more the guy that plays in space. He's built better for this spread offense. If that's what they're going to do, if they're going to go single back, 3 or 4 receiver, then James Cook's your guy. Kind of reminds me of Alvin Kamara, a young Alvin Kamara. Not the Alvin Kamara you see with the Saints, maybe the Alvin Kamara you saw with Tennessee before he'd really put his game all together. But he's very elusive. He's got good speed. He's the younger brother of Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings. Comes from a very talent-rich area. Zamir and James were both 5-star recruits in 2018. And, Zamir's had 2 ACLs since then on both knees. And last year he was kind of a backup and played it a little bit more in the Sugar Bowl. Did okay in that win over Baylor. I'm not sure what he's going to look like in space, but I think James Cook is a guy, number 4. I think that's a guy that everybody's going to probably key on.
Talking to Mike Griffith from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on the Whole Hog podcast. Before we let you go, Mike, I just want to ask about Arkansas head coach Sam Pittman. What did he mean to the Georgia Bulldogs?
Well, you'll see when you see that offensive line, you won't believe they lost 4 starters because these guys are good. And it's all Sam. I mean, that's just – now that's on the field. I want to point that out because, yes, he did an unbelievable job recruiting and building that offense. I mean, there's two guys got paid a lot of money. Were first-round draft picks last year because of Sam Pittman. Another guy went in the 4th round, Solomon Kinley, and he'd have gone higher if he didn't have an ankle injury all year. Sam's made a lot of people a lot of money here as a line coach. But beyond that, just a real popular, warm figure, really the glue guy. When Sam Pittman took that job, I was kind of like, uh-oh, because Sam was the guy that's universally loved and respected. Every staff, whether it's a football staff or just a work staff, maybe even family, there's that one person that just kind of brings everybody together. And that was Sam Pittman. That is Sam Pittman. And I think he's going to do that at Arkansas if they give him time and support. But yeah, it's a big loss for Georgia. And listen, Matt Luke is a fine young offensive line coach. I think he's Kirby's age. They both played in the SEC at the same time. So, I think that's eased it a little bit because I think Matt's a pretty popular guy. But there's nobody like Sam. I mean, Sam's a special person and just a beloved figure. I think you guys are figuring that out. And I think the players certainly know that. I was watching the press conferences and, boy, they're just 100% bought in. Maybe 2, but I saw Rakeem was talking about being a smash mouth team. I wanted to say, man, you might want to wait another week before you run that because George is on the other side hearing this now. You want to talk smash mouth football. I would have waited another week to put Rakeem Boyd out in front of the media because he delivered some nice bulletin board material. And I don't think it was out of disrespect. I think he said in his conversation that he knows what Georgia has and they're good. But you start talking about wanting to play smash mouth football and smash the other team in the mouth. I mean, you guys know it doesn't take much for these teams to get fired up. So they're expecting an Arkansas team that's going to want to go toe-to-toe for 60 minutes. Arkansas has not been shy about telling Georgia that this is going to be a physical game and that they're going to fight 4 quarters. So I just say be careful what you wish for because, these dogs are about tired of hitting each other over here. And they've got something to prove. Florida got picked to win the East, and I think this defense only had 2 guys make preseason All-SEC. So there might be a little chip on the shoulder from the dogs and coming out in those retro uniforms this week. They're going to be wearing the white jerseys and red pants, kind of a flashback to the 1980 opener when Herschel Walker ran over Billy Bates. Hard to believe it was that long ago, but that was their national championship season, and they like these uniforms a lot.
Yeah, that's going to be a really good look for Georgia when they visit Fayetteville. Well, Mike, I want to thank you so much for the insight that you provided us here on the Whole Hog Podcast, and best of luck, especially on that Feinbaum interview later.
Yeah. Hey, I want to thank you guys. Listen, I read a lot of your work this week. I got a lot of stuff off WholeHog Sports. You guys did a great job and kind of helped me figure out what was going on with Arkansas. So likewise, thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, that's Mike Griffith from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Make sure to check him out. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Griffith 32.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for WholeHog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Great interview there with Mike Griffith from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Some great information about the Georgia Bulldogs and Arkansas, Georgia coming up tomorrow. All right, guys, we got some buy or sell action. Real simple. I'm going to ask you a question. We're going to play a clip. You're going to either buy or sell. It's simple as that. This game is not original to WholeHog Sports, so but I don't think it really deserves any other further explanation. Are we ready?
I just want some Price is Right music to go with it.
I can get you some. That might be copyrighted, but I can get you some knockoff Price is Right music or something. Here, how about this? All right, here we go with this great theme as our background. Matt Jones, we will go to you first. Buy or sell this from Georgia head coach Kirby Smart?
I don't know that there are any real issues, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't put a huge, premium on them having been part of the organization.
All right, Matt, buy or sell? Arkansas has multiple former Georgia assistants on its staff. Are you buying or selling Kirby's comments that just because the people on the other sideline worked for you, it doesn't mean the game plan changes at all?
Yeah, I buy that. I think it still comes down to talent, and I think he probably knows that they can out-talent Arkansas at this point in time. And, I don't know that their game plan changes a whole lot because they've got Pittman or Scott Fountain on the staff. But you also have to think about they've got a new offensive coordinator. They've got Todd Monken. And so I think this is going to be a Georgia team that looks a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. In the past, they've been, probably more of a run-first type offense. Todd Monken is the type that, go back to when he was at Southern Miss, they had a 4,000-yard passer. And when you go back to when he was at Oklahoma State and coaching Brandon Whedon, they threw the ball 46 times a game. I think there's going to be a happy medium somewhere between what Georgia has been and what Todd Monken has been. But I think this is going to look a lot different, at least offensively. Georgia to what Sam Pittman or Scott Fountain saw when they were on the staff last year. And then defensively, that Kirby Smart game plan is not changing. What they do works. What they do works against the best teams, and what they do works against other teams. And I think that, they're going to be who they are when they play against Arkansas this week.
From a purely facing Arkansas perspective, I'll buy it because like Matt said, like they can just probably out-talent Arkansas. But for like anybody else, I'll sell it. Just college coaches are among the most paranoid people in the world, and so they will make adjustments and tweaks to their game plans.
Yeah, you got to believe that Kirby Smart has faith in his team to where he could almost tell you the play that's coming, and they could run it and feel like they could still execute it against Arkansas. All right, guys, next buy or sell. We're going south to the Bayou.
I had a shovel in my hand, and the phone rang. He goes, "Hey, man, they have an assistant strength coach job at Arkansas. Do you want it?" I said, "Hold on." I took the shrimp shovel. Shoot! I threw it in the bayou, and I said, "Hell yeah." He said, "Okay, man, you got to be here by Monday." I said, "I got one question for you." He said, "What?" I said, "Where the hell's Arkansas, man?"
Buy or sell? LSU head coach Ed Orgeron, back when he was just getting his career started, he didn't know where Arkansas was. Scotty, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm buying that. Ain't nobody got time for geography when you're shrimping. He didn't know where, like, he knew where the state of Arkansas was, but like he explained it kind of in that 60-minute segment that he'd like never been across Louisiana state line before. Like he knew where Arkansas was, he'd never been there before, but he didn't know where the University of Arkansas was. I grew up with people that don't know where the University of Arkansas is.
And you grew up in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 100%. Bob Holt asked him at SEC on the SEC coaches teleconference about that, and he was like, "It was the university." But going to you, Matt, buy or sell?
Yeah, no. Where Fable is, I buy it. You know, this is a different time. LSU and Arkansas weren't in the SEC together. Ed played at LSU for a year. Then he transferred to Northwestern State in Natchitoches. He was a GA in Natchitoches. He coached at McNeese State down in Lake Charles. That's a long way from Fayetteville, Arkansas, and those aren't teams that are playing the Razorbacks. And so, yeah, I buy that. You grow up and you spend all your life down in South or Central Louisiana with programs that aren't affiliated with Arkansas in any way, shape, or form. I'll buy that.
In that 60 Minutes interview, which if you haven't seen it, I'd really encourage you to go watch it. Orgeron says that he always wanted to go to LSU from his small town. He gets the opportunity to go to LSU, and then within 2 weeks, he's back home.
He flamed out.
He flamed out real quick.
Got homesick, I guess.
And he got home. The next day, he's home. His dad wakes him up at, he's at 5 or 6 a.m. and said, "All right, let's go to work." And he said, "I was digging ditches on the side of the road. People driving by looking at me going, quitter. And so that was really
I love hearing those types of stories, like what coaches did, like for jobs. And I kind of did a couple of stories on that. I think that's super interesting, just finding out what those guys did before they, broke into coaching.
For sure. All right, moving on. We're going to hear from QB1 himself, Felipe Franks.
Yeah, I think establishing the run game is important in the game of football in general. But yeah, this coming up Saturday, we got to establish the run game, and I think our guys up front are ready for that. They're ready for the challenge.
Felipe mentions the guys up front. We already talked about it in this podcast, how they are young and that Arkansas really does need to establish the run, but it's against a really good Georgia team. So the spread for Arkansas versus Georgia is 26.5. We're not going to go win-loss here because of the spread is so big and Arkansas is such a big underdog. But we are going to talk about the spread. Buy or sell, if Arkansas rushes for less than 150 yards, they can still keep the game within the spread. Buy or sell, Matt?
I sell. I think this still comes down to defense and how well Arkansas's defense can contain Georgia. I think the Bulldogs are probably going to have a big day defensively in this game. So I feel like Arkansas would have to score a lot of points and probably have to have a lot of success through the passing game in order to win. And so I'll sell that.
I'll sell it too. I don't think Arkansas is going to get to 100 yards rushing. Like, you probably looked at Georgia's game notes. When was the last time they allowed a 100-yard rusher or a team to rush for 100 yards? It's probably been a minute. I don't think Arkansas is going to do that.
Well, I think they were number 1 in scoring defense and number 3 in total defense, and they might have been like number 3 in rushing defense last year. They're really good against the run.
All right, guys, last buy or sell here on the podcast for today. No audio clip this time, but I feel like you could pull basically any sports talk show or really news talk from the past since March for this audio. But buy or sell, the SEC will not have a game canceled because of COVID this year. Matt?
That is a hard sell.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the easiest sell you can make. Look across football. Look at what's happening in the Big 12. Look at what's happening, at some of these ACC schools right now. And, gosh, even here in Arkansas in the 7A West, you're seeing it happen. 2 of the 4 games this week are getting canceled. So there are going to be games that get postponed or become a no contest because of this. It's inevitable. The SEC knew it was inevitable, and that's why when they put the schedule together, they did so with the thought of maybe we can move some games to the scheduled bye weeks, and then at the end of the season, instead of going from the Iron Bowl into the SEC championship game, you have, I know they did the schedule a little bit different, but what I'm saying is December the 5th is the end of the regular season. The SEC championship game is December the 19th. And so if there is an instance where a Western division isn't settled yet by the end of the day on December the 5th. They can play a game December the 12th if they need to, or the same way in the SEC East. The SEC, I think they know that there are going to be delays and postponements and cancellations due to coronavirus, and that's why they set the schedule up the way they did. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Arkansas lose a game or maybe 2 games because of this, and it has nothing to do with anything that I know about what's going on within the program. It's just listening to the coaches. Listen to Sam Pittman on his radio show this week saying that the thing that makes me the most nervous is those COVID-19 tests that they're taking throughout the week. He said this week we passed the first one, and as of his radio show Wednesday night, there was some apprehension in his voice saying we still got 2 more to go before we know who we're even going to have available for the Georgia game.
Yeah, it's a hard sell. That I think that's keeping Pittman up at night. Honestly, like he's not allowing his mind to turn off, or his mind can't turn off just because the testing is just kind of wearing on his mind, and he's not going to feel, super comfortable or confident, until they get those test results back and they come in negative. I almost said positive, but that would have been incorrect of me to say. Yeah, it's very hard sell. I mean, you look at Arkansas State, like they're not playing for the second weekend in a row, right? Like, I mean, they played a couple of games, and Memphis has had some COVID
party bus. Memphis
hit their team. I don't know about Kansas State, but I mean, the last 2 weeks, it just I don't know. It's inevitable that games are going to get canceled and postponed, and yeah.
All right, guys. Anything else to add here on the Georgia preview of the Whole Hog Podcast?
I'm just excited to see a game get played and that we're not talking about practice anymore. This has been such a long preseason. They started doing the walkthrough practices on July the 24th. And I did some math here a second ago, and I think it's been 302 days by kickoff that it will have been since Arkansas's last game. I mean, think about it. The last time they played was the day after Thanksgiving last year. And here we are. This is supposed to be game 4 of the season. Had the schedule, gone off the way it was supposed to. They're supposed to play Nevada and then Notre Dame and then Mississippi State and then Texas A&M. This would have been the Texas A&M week down in Arlington.
Yeah,
this would have been Bikes, Blues, and Barbecue week here in Fayetteville.
Yeah, this time last year we were talking about the San Jose State meltdown.
Yeah, and so I'm just glad that we're going to have something to talk. We're going to have actual game film evidence that we can talk about after this game Saturday.
I'm going to have Felipe Frank's film to go through to see how, just like I did last year, just analyzing, his throws at various depths on the field and, charting yards after catch and inaccuracies and accurate balls and stuff like that. Like I'm really excited about that. I've not been excited to wake up at 6:00 on Sunday and write the game story for the magazine. I haven't been that excited in a long time.
All right. Well, we want to thank you, the listener, for joining us here on the WholeHog Podcast. There are tons of podcasts that you can listen to. I mean, thousands upon thousands of them on whatever podcasting app you're listening to us on right now. So we want to thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Make sure to like and subscribe, share with your friends. And we also understand that the thousands upon thousands of you that would normally be traveling up to Fayetteville or be in Fayetteville and traveling to Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium is going to be significantly slashed this year because only about 17,000 people are going to be allowed into the stadium. Well, if you still want somebody to be your inside scoop for in-stadium access, make sure to follow WholeHogSports.com and go there for all of the latest information. But also make sure to follow Scotty Bordelon. He will be in person at the games at NWA Scotty on Twitter, and he will be our eyes and ears. We can only send one media member from Whole Hog Sports. So Scotty will be our eyes and ears in the booth at game. It's gonna be a little weird. It felt like sometimes, Scotty, there were a few games last year that there was only about 17,000, but in actuality there was a lot more than that. So it's gonna be a little strange, I'm sure, to be there with just 17,000 of your closest friends instead of 72. All right, well, For Scotty Bordelon and Matt Jones and our entire WholeHogSports.com crew, I am Seth Campbell saying, please mask up so that we can have football season. As we mentioned earlier, no COVID outbreaks have been happening all over college football, so we don't want any at University of Arkansas. Make sure to mask up and make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. Well, for all those guys, I'm Seth Campbell saying so long. We'll see you back here next week.